When I first looked at the scriptures, before I had read Brenda's email, I thought I had the world's shortest introduction. I was just going to say karma. But then Brenda said, don't focus on the bad. So since we're talking about gratitude, we need to remember to look at what is in front of us and around us. There was once a rich man who wore expensive clothes, and every day he ate the best food. But a poor beggar named Lazarus was brought to the gate of the rich man's house. He was happy just to eat the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. His body was covered with sores, and dogs kept coming up to lick them. The poor man died, and angels took him to a place of honor next to Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. He went to hell and was suffering terribly. When he looked up and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side, he said to Abraham, "Have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip his fingers in water and touch my tongue. I'm suffering terribly in this fire." Abraham answered, "My friend, remember that while you lived, you had everything good, and Lazarus had everything bad. Now he is happy, and you are in pain. And besides, there is a deep ditch between us, and no one from either side can cross over." But the rich man said, "Abraham, then please send Lazarus to my father's home. Let him warn my 5 brothers so they won't come to this terrible place." Abraham answered, "Your brothers can read what Moses and the prophets wrote. They should pay attention to that." Then the rich man said, "No, that's not enough. If only someone from the dead would go to them, they would listen and turn to God." So Abraham said, "If they won't pay attention to Moses and the prophets, they won't listen to someone who has come back from the dead." For our second reading this morning, since we are talking about gratitude, the one thing we really have to remember is to give thanks. When you have come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess, you possess it and you settle in it. You shall take some of the first of all the fruit of the ground which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket and go to the place that the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. You shall go to the priest who is in office at that time and say to him, "Today I declare to the Lord your God that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our ancestors to give us." When the priest takes the basket from your hand and sets it down before the altar of the Lord your God, you shall make the response before the Lord your God. "A wandering Armenian was my ancestor. He went down into Egypt and lived there as an alien. Few in number, and there he became a great nation, mighty and populous. When the Egyptians treated us harshly and afflicted us by imposing hard labor on us, we cried to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. The Lord heard our voices and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. The Lord brought us out of Egypt with the mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with a terrifying display of power and with signs and wonders. And he brought us into the place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now I bring the first of the fruits of the ground to you, that you, O Lord, have given me. You shall set it down before the Lord your God, and bow down before the Lord your God. Then you, together with the Levites and the aliens who reside among you, shall celebrate with all the bounty that the Lord your God has given you and to your house.
Well, today we're continuing our pledge campaign for the 2020 fiscal year. And over the course of the campaign, we are interviewing members of our congregation who are at different stages in their life about their devotion to generosity, which is the theme of our campaign. And we're going to culminate this whole experience with our Pledge Sunday, which will happen the first Sunday of November, and we'll have a special luncheon after worship, so we hope that you'll all be able to attend that and plan to be here. And today I'm going to interview or have a conversation with Denise Church, so I'm going to have Denise come on up here. And if you missed our last interview or our last conversation with Jake Sargent, it's on our website. So you can go to the website on the homepage. There's a link to the sermon section of the website, and you can check out the interview there. So, hi.
Hello.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of you know Denise really well because she has a long history with our predecessor congregation, one of our predecessor congregations. But I know that there's some of you who are newer to the church who maybe don't know Denise. So Denise, why don't you let us know a little something about you? What do you want folks to know about you?
So, as Brenda said, I grew up in Niles congregation, the church that was on H Street, and it is long history. Like Miss Ricky was my preschool teacher. So it's pretty cool that she now does that for my kids. I've got the 3 girls. Only one made it today. The other 2 are sleepy. My husband, Jesse, and I have been together for 22 years. So we started dating when we were 5. And we just went to his 20-year college reunion last night, so that was different. But I love this community, and it's a place that I get to share with my mom, so that's great. And I'm really glad my parents brought us to this community. And I'm a big, mushy, emotional person, so that happens too.
Okay. So how did you learn about generosity?
You know, when Jake said last week he learned it at home, and that was a huge thing for us. My parents were always jumping in and helping when people needed help, and that sometimes meant that there was an extra person sleeping on the couch or being there. And it really, to me, I never looked at it as like, oh, who's this random person? It was, this is somebody who needs that help and needs that love. And every holiday there was always extra room at the table, and it was kind of whatever strays needed to be there and who needed that family love was always welcomed. And the big one, my mom's mom, Grammy, had always told me, whatever you think you're having that's bad, somebody else would line up to have what you have. And we try to pass that on to our girls, that just the attitude of gratitude, and hopefully it's been working.
Yeah, good. I like that. I haven't heard it put quite that way, that, you know, whatever you think you're going through, there's somebody who'd line up to have your life right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what are ways that generosity plays a part in your life right now?
For me, falling into the middle age category, which was a difficult one to bite onto, but we're definitely there. And I find that my biggest way to give generosity is to give my time. I am really involved with the PTA at our school, and I feel like it's not just helping my children, it's helping the greater community. So I do a lot of artwork for the school. I paint murals. I help teach art classes. And then, according to the teachers, the biggest thing that I give them in generosity is baked goods. Because I drop off a lot of baked goods at the school. But we feel like we're showing our kids that in your free time, which is, you could sit on the couch and watch TV, or you can go out there and be part of your community. You're having fun doing it, but you're helping people in the long run.
Yeah. So you talked about what you said really leads into the next question, which is kind of somewhat at your stage of life, which means you've got a house full. You've got from one end of elementary school to the other, the ages of your children, and there are lots of demands on your time and financial resources, and there are so many organizations that you could support. So it's kind of a two-part question. How do you choose, what organizations to support, and why is the church one of them?
So we, since Mom has moved in, we get lots and lots of mail asking for donations.
Yeah.
And, she was always the, all right. And in the past year, we've kind of tightened the reins on all of us, saying, okay, this is where we're going to donate to. And for us, it seems to be our community of our school. And for me, it feels good to see directly. Like, we just approved buying 15 laptops for our school. Mm-hmm. And for me, maybe that's a little selfish part of it, that I want to see where it's going. Mm-hmm. So we've definitely chosen to give to our school and to our direct community. And when we give here at church, there's no feeling to me that, like, oh, where's that going to go? I feel very trusted that when we give here, I know it's going to go to a necessary source. And we still do, my children do blessing bags, and we carry them in the car, and for them, that's the immediate. They get to see it and give it to a person, and they feel like it was a direct connection for them. So at this point in life, I really feel more, instead of the broad spectrum, it's a little bit closer to home.
Yeah. Good. So how has your understanding of what it means to be generous changed over your life so far?
My husband is a good one with that, because sometimes it's where's the value, in time or in money? And there are times when I give my time, and that's my resource. And there's other times where, especially like with my daughter's junior high, I can't be there. I can't be on campus. That's when I tend to write the check instead of. And so that there's been a shifting of that. Now, having a little bit more financial resource, I feel like I can start to give a little bit more financially, because I can't always be there with the time. So there has been a shift in that. And for me, I've kind of looked at, what can I do without? We talk a lot in our house about niceties and necessities. And I've started to cut away some of the niceties a little bit more, because there's other people that have necessities. Yeah. So I would rather give toward that and do a little less for myself.
Yeah. So what Pastor Jeff and I like to say, a world where, everyone has enough and no one has too much. Yeah.
And that's, when I was younger, I think, I'm going to have this huge house and I'm going to go on great vacations all the time. And there's been a huge mental shift for me that a great vacation just means I'm spending time with my family.
Yeah. And
like this summer we did Cazadero, and that was not the Bahamas, but it was what we needed at that time.
Yeah.
And then it made a difference, because financially then I was able to do a little bit more for the school, because we didn't put the money into vacation.
Nice. Yeah. So how do you decide what your financial pledge to the church will be, if you're willing to share that?
Again, more of what can I put aside that my family is still comfortable, but I can watch the church grow a little bit more. My mom and I were just saying, it's really cool to see a lot of younger families now, and I know that when I'm saying, oh, that's a cute young couple, I'm like, oh my gosh, that means I'm middle-aged. What I'm saying is a cute young couple coming in. But for me, I know that if I'm putting a little bit more back into the church, it's helping those families as well. And it's that rotation of my children are growing up here, their children are going to be growing up here. So it's each year I try to do a little bit more than I did in previous years. And it's funny when we get our, I guess it's the breakdown
Your
of
statement.
Yeah, our statement. And
Statement.
I look, I'm like, oh man, I missed a little bit of time this summer. So then the next, I like giving my pledge weekly. It's a little old school, but it feels good. So I'll double my pledge because I'm like, oh, I got to catch up because I made a promise. That's how much I'm going to bring. So that's kind of where I've been each year, trying to step up a little bit more.
So one of the things we talk about here is that generosity and pledging is part of our can be part of our spiritual practice. So how is being generous part of your spiritual life?
It sounds funny, but there's a book called How Full Is Your Bucket? And I know we have lots of previous teachers in here, so you guys probably read that. But it talks about how when you are giving to others, you're filling your own bucket. And I try to teach the girls that you're giving to somebody else, but you're also fulfilling yourself. And for me, it's a very real thing that I know when I'm contributing to other people, I feel fulfilled. And we're trying to practice that as often as possible. And when I don't, with the blessing bags, we were in a rush to soccer practice, and my daughter's like, give him the bag. I'm like, well, I've got to take the light. We've got to go. So we go, and then the rest of the day, I'm like, man, if I had just slowed down to give him that little bag of goodies and hygiene things, I would have felt better. He would have felt better. So it's taking the time to do it. Taking the time.
I love that your girls are noticing.
Oh, yes.
You know, because that's one of the parts of the scripture, the first reading today with Lazarus and the rich man, is that the rich man doesn't even see the poor person at his gate. And so, you know, with the blessing bags, you're really kind of teaching your girls to see people who are less fortunate than they are.
They're very aware, and I know a lot of parents my age kind of shy away from those things or cross the street. And I just tell my kids, you know, they're people too. They need love too. Smile, nod, you know, just give that little bit, and that will lift that person up. And it's really good to see that in their heart. We always end our prayer with, there's only room for love and good. And I actually just painted that across their walls, so when they wake up in the morning, they see that. And I've always told them, if you don't let the yuck in, there's no room for it. If you're always giving love and pouring love, then that's what you're going to get in return. And that is basically how I feel about generosity too. If you're giving it all the time, God gives it back to you. And I feel extremely blessed in my life. So I think following that has given me that.
Well, that just leads right into the next question, which is one of the ways that our scripture readings this morning, which don't seem to be especially connected but are, is that generosity can be that kind of impulse to give back, to be generous, can be a reflection or a response to the movement of God in our lives. We see the negative of that in the first story. You know, the rich man doesn't seem to reflect on God at all. He doesn't seem to recognize that his life has been richly blessed. And then in the second reading from Deuteronomy, we see the Israelites being urged to recall the great movement of God in their lives. They've been brought out of slavery and liberation. They've been given a land, rich land, ripe for planting, that they should give back. Out of that work of God in their lives, they should, respond to that. So how do you see that moving in your life? How is generosity a reflection of how God has worked in your life?
So here's my mushy part.
It's the Kleenex.
already grabbed it earlier. Yeah, I left it. So many of you guys know because your prayers really helped me this summer. Oh, man. I had cancer of my intestines, and there was a song that kept playing over and over called Blessed Beyond All Measure. And the refrain was counting all my blessings. Yeah. And thanks, Ken, you're so good. Two's good.
Okay.
I won't be that happy. But for me, Jeff and I had talked about, it was almost like a switch. Mm-hmm. And it kind of reset me back on a path that I had been raised in, to be generous, to be kind, to really be aware of what was around me. And at my phase of having 3 very spirited girls, you start to forget all the good that's around, because it's every day you're picking up the dirty socks, you're making lunches that come home full because I didn't want leftovers. It's a whole thing. And with having the diagnosis and thankfully very quick surgery and everything was clear and fine, it reminded me of everything that is good that I have and that God continues to give me, and that this is really almost a second chance, because if I had ignored it, things would be very different for myself, for my family, which my husband pointed out, not just my family, my community. Yeah. And I feel like because I've been given that second chance, I need to be the best Christian that I know to be. Yeah. And that's by giving my time, giving what I can financially, and just pouring as much love out there as I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. So just kind of the wrap-up question, what does it mean to you to be devoted to generosity?
Probably just, like I said, being the best possible you. If you are living your life Christ-like, the old cheesy one, because this will again show the age, the WWJD. When I was a teenager, everybody had our bracelet, what would Jesus do? And it almost got cheesy for a minute, but I say to my girls all the time, is that a Christ-like decision? Is that something God would do? When they're wrestling or slapping each other.
Well, I don't know. There was
Jesus
the whole Jacob wrestling with God thing. But when they get old enough and read their Bible, they might come back with that.
They do lawyer me often. But it's just living your most Christ-like life and knowing that God does not judge us. And just because you had one bad day or made one bad decision doesn't mean that's a path that you have to be on. You get that every day is a new day that God gives us. So on that day, live your best.
Great. Well, Denise, thank you so much for willing to come up and do this and be vulnerable up here.
Yeah.
We're really grateful.
Thank you. And I'm grateful for all of you guys.
Great. Good. Thank you. And let's take a moment for reflection, and you can ponder this question.